I could feel my blood boil as I watched him grin, blowing leaves right at Maya and Lily's play area. Leaves spun everywhere in my yard, like a tiny storm from his big leaf blower. Without thinking, I grabbed my rake and ran across the yard, putting every leaf back on his lawn, my heart pounding with adrenaline. This wasn't just about leaves anymore. It's a silent battle that would decide who really controlled this yard and our peace. Before we dive into the story, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story like this. Saturday mornings are usually my favorite. It is the only day I can breathe a little. No rush, no work, no alarms. Just a little quiet time before my girls wake up. So at 7:18 a.m., I stepped outside my house at 3121 Redwood Court with a warm cup of coffee in my hand. The air felt soft and cool. A gentle breeze moved the tall trees around our cul-de-sac. Birds were singing somewhere near the mailbox. I could even hear my girls, Maya and Lily, laughing inside as they played one of their morning games. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was calm. Then it happened. Bro-um! A loud, heavy noise hit me so hard I almost dropped my cup. The sound was coming from next door, Joel's house at 3123. His big, strong leaf blower roared like a jet engine. I closed my eyes for a second. I knew that sound too well. When I opened them, there he was, Joel, holding that leaf blower with both hands, pointing it straight at his yard. No, not his yard. My yard. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. Then he gave the smallest, most annoying little smile. Before I could even blink, a wild storm of leaves came rushing toward me. Brown leaves, red leaves, yellow leaves, all spinning like a tiny tornado, all landing right on my clean grass. My peaceful morning was gone in 2 seconds. I stood there frozen, not angry, not shouting, just tired. People think I don't get upset because I'm too calm, but the truth is, I don't have the energy to start a fight every day. I work 2 jobs just to take care of my girls. I barely sleep most nights, so any quiet moment I get is precious to me. And Joel has been taking those moments away, one leaf storm at a time. This wasn't the first time. For 3 weeks straight, every time he turned on that blower, my yard somehow ended up full of his leaves. I tried to be a good neighbor. I tried to be patient. I spoke to him once, very kindly. He just shrugged and said, "Leaves don't have names, Barbara." And now here he was again, blowing them toward me on purpose, acting like it was just a fun little game. Charlotte, his wife, stood on their porch watching with her arms crossed. She didn't say a word. She just smiled at him like it was all cute. I clenched my hands around my coffee cup and forced myself to breathe slowly. I didn't want to start my morning with stress. I didn't want my daughters to walk outside and see their mom upset. They already worry too much. They see how hard I work. They know how tired I get. So I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, Barbara. Just stay calm." The blower finally went silent. Joel looked at me again, nodded like he had done something important, and walked back inside. I let out a soft sigh and stepped off the porch to see how bad the mess was. Leaves covered almost every part of my yard, thick, messy piles everywhere. I slowly bent down and brushed a few leaves aside. That's when I saw it. Something shiny, something metallic, buried under the leaves right near the edge of my flower bed. It was small, round, silver. At first, I thought it was just a coin, but when I picked it up and turned it in the light, my heart paused. It was a bracelet, a beautiful one, and on the tiny silver plate, 2 letters were engraved very clearly. C.T., Charlotte Turner, Joel's wife. But how did her bracelet end up buried under a pile of leaves in my yard? Before I could think of the answer, I heard a soft creaking sound behind me, coming from Joel's side of the fence. Someone was standing there. Someone watching me.
For a few seconds, I didn't move. The wooden fence between our homes was tall, but it wasn't tall enough to hide the shadow standing on the other side. Whoever it was stood very still. I could feel eyes on me, watching me hold Charlotte's bracelet like it was something dangerous. I swallowed hard and stood up slowly. The shadow moved away without a word. The fence stopped shaking. And just like that, everything went silent again. I held onto the bracelet and looked at it for a long moment. It was small and pretty, with tiny silver beads and those two letters shining in the morning sun. C.T. Charlotte Turner. My neighbor. Joel's wife. Why was it in my yard? Why under a pile of leaves that Joel blew over? A normal person would think maybe she dropped it, maybe it got carried by the wind. But something about it felt strange. Very strange. I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my chest, but it stayed with me as I walked toward Joel's porch. If I didn't ask now, the questions would eat me alive all day. I took a deep breath, held the bracelet gently, and knocked on their porch rail. Joel? Charlotte? Can we talk for a moment? No answer. I could see their curtains move slightly, like someone peeked out, but the door stayed closed. I tried again, louder this time. Please, I just want to clear something up. Still nothing. Then the door opened, slowly. Charlotte stepped out first. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, and she wore that same calm but smug smile I'd seen earlier. Joel walked out behind her, arms crossed like he was already tired of me. Yes, Barbara? Charlotte asked sweetly. Too sweetly. I held up the bracelet. I found this in your yard. Charlotte blinked once, then twice, but the smile never left her face. Oh, that's strange, she said lightly. Things roll around sometimes. Joel nodded. Yeah, leaves don't have addresses, Barbara. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice gentle. I understand that, but this wasn't on the grass. It was buried under a pile of leaves. A pile that came from your blower. Charlotte shrugged like it meant nothing. Joel looked at me like I was making a big deal out of nothing. I didn't want to fight. I really didn't. So I just said, softly, I thought you would want it back. Charlotte reached out and took the bracelet with 2 fingers, almost like she didn't want to touch my hand. Thank you. We'll be more careful. But the way she said it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like she was laughing on the inside. I stepped back and nodded anyway. All right. I wanted to be polite. That's all. They didn't say anything else. They just turned and walked inside, closing the door very slowly, like the conversation bored them. But the strange feeling in my chest didn't go away. If anything, it grew. Later that afternoon, when the sun was high and the girls were drawing on the living room floor, I stepped outside again. I wanted to check the yard one more time just to keep things clean. That's when I noticed it. Something in Joel's upstairs window. At first, I thought it was just a reflection, but when I squinted my eyes, my breath caught in my throat. There was a small, dark circle behind the glass. A round shape, perfectly still. It was a lens, a camera lens, pointed straight at my yard, at my porch, at me. My heart started to beat faster. How long had it been there? Was someone watching me this whole time? Recording me? Watching my kids? I stepped back slowly, trying not to make any sudden moves. Then, as I stared at that window, the lens moved. Just a tiny shift. Like someone, or something, was adjusting it.
For the rest of the day, I tried to pretend that everything was normal. I cooked breakfast, I helped the girls with their drawings, I cleaned the kitchen, I folded clothes. But the whole time, my mind kept going back to that camera in the upstairs window. Was I imagining it? Was it just a shadow? Was Joel filming something else? I wanted to believe it was nothing, but the shift I saw in that lens, the tiny movement, it felt real, too real. Later that afternoon, I walked outside with the girls so they could play with their bubbles. The sunlight made the bubbles glow like tiny rainbows, and their giggles filled the whole yard. For a moment, I was glad they didn't know anything was wrong. But kids notice things faster than adults, and my daughters, they noticed first. "Mom?" Maya asked softly, looking toward Joel's house. "Why does Mr. Joel always look at our home?" I rose. "What do you mean?" I tried to smile. "He always stands by his window," Lily whispered, pointing up. "He watches us when we play." My chest tightened. I didn't want them to be scared. I didn't want them to see fear in my eyes. So I said gently, "Maybe he's just looking at something else." But Maya shook her head. "No, Mom, he watches you too. And his wife told people you're too soft." I blinked. "Where did you hear that?" "At the bus stop," Maya said. "She told another mom that you don't know how to stand up for yourself." I felt something warm rise in my stomach. Not anger. Something deeper. Something protective. My children were hearing things. My children were being watched. And now, the uneasy feeling was no longer small. It was loud. As the days passed, more strange things started happening. Every morning before I stepped outside, there was a new pile of leaves in my yard, perfectly placed, right in the middle of my grass. A few days later, my recycling bin was knocked over, spilling bottles and papers across my driveway. I cleaned it up quietly, trying not to let the girls see. Then our trash can rolled all the way from the curb to our porch. There was no wind that day. I tried to push it out of my mind, but then the objects started showing up. First, a small black hairpin near my welcome mat. I didn't wear hairpins, but Charlotte did. Next, a broken silver key in the grass. I picked it up and saw the tiny sticker on it, a Turner address label stuck to the side. Then a crumpled receipt from the local store ended up in my backyard. The name on it? Charlotte Turner. Every single item, every leaf pile, every mess, it all pointed to one place. Their home. But why? Why were they doing this? I tried to stay calm. I tried to breathe. I tried to remind myself that maybe it was all a big misunderstanding. But inside, something told me it wasn't. One quiet afternoon, when the girls were inside watching a cartoon, I stepped out to water my flowers. The street was calm. Sunlight covered the sidewalks. It felt like any normal day. That's when my neighbor across the street, Mrs. Delaney, stepped out of her garage. She was in her 60s, gentle, always smiling. But today, her smile was gone. She looked around first, left, then right, almost like she was scared someone would hear her. Then she hurried across the street toward me. "Barbara," she whispered, "can you tell me something?" I nodded slowly. She leaned closer, her voice barely a breath. "You need to be careful with Joel and his wife." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked toward their house, then back at me. "They did the same thing at their last home, the same little tricks, the same watching, the same mess. They were forced to move, but they told everyone it was because of unfriendly neighbors." Her voice lowered even more. "But the truth is, they were the problem."
Before I could speak, before I could even process her words, her eyes widened suddenly, staring past my shoulder. I turned around slowly, and standing at the edge of my yard was Joel, watching us, listening.
I thought the day was finally calming down. After hearing what the neighbor told me about Joel and his wife, Charlotte, and how they caused trouble at their old house, my mind was already spinning. I tucked the girls into bed early. I needed quiet, just for a moment. But quiet did not come. It started with a soft click, then darkness. Every light in my house went out at once. I stood in the hallway, the girls' nightlight across the room flickering faintly. I whispered, "It's okay, it's just the breaker." But even I didn't believe myself. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone for a flashlight. I opened the front door to check the outside breaker box and stopped because I saw something. A shadow, standing still at the edge of my yard, not moving, not speaking, just watching. At first, I thought it was Joel. The shape, the height, everything matched. But then the shadow stepped back into darkness and disappeared. I swallowed hard and forced myself to walk toward the breaker box. My feet felt heavy. Every step felt louder than it should. I kept scanning the yard, the street, the trees. Redwood Court was too quiet. I opened the breaker box. Everything was flipped off. All of it. Every switch. Someone had done it on purpose. With shaking hands, I turned everything back on. The house lights came alive again, one by one, glowing through the windows like tiny, warm stars. I took a deep breath and started walking back inside. That's when I heard it, a soft rustle behind me, like someone walking through leaves. I spun around, holding my phone light toward the sound. And there, right near the fence, sat a fresh pile of leaves. Again. Perfectly shaped. Perfectly placed. Like someone had taken their time, late at night, to drop them right at my back door. I walked closer, my finger trembling on the phone screen. Leaves rustled lightly in the cool night air. I whispered, "Why are you doing this?" That's when I noticed something shining inside the pile. Something small. I knelt slowly and brushed the leaves aside. A tiny plastic car. Blue. Scratched. Old. But I recognized it. It wasn't ours. It wasn't the girls'. It wasn't even something Joel's sons played with. It belonged to the little boy who lived 2 houses down, Mrs. Collins's son, Aiden. I lifted the toy slowly, confused. Why was it buried here? Why in my yard? Why at night? I heard a soft tap, tap, tap on glass. I froze. It was coming from the Joel's upstairs window. I lifted my eyes and saw a small, blinking red light. A camera pointed straight at me, recording. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, then another. I didn't want to panic, but every part of me felt cold. Someone was not only watching my house, they were watching me, and they wanted me to know. I ran inside, locked the door, and checked every window twice. The girls were fast asleep. I didn't want to wake them, but inside my chest, worry tightened like a knot. A new note under the fence yesterday. A toy from another neighbor's child, now hidden in my yard. Someone flipping off my power. A camera pointing straight at me. This was no longer petty neighbor drama. This was no longer about leaves.
Someone was playing a much larger game, and I had no idea why. Just as I turned to head upstairs, my phone buzzed in my hand. A message. Unknown number. I opened it slowly. It said, "Stop asking questions." And attached,
I did not sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my warm cup of chamomile tea with both hands, trying to keep them from shaking. Maya and Lily were already asleep, safe under their blankets, their soft night lights glowing. But my eyes kept drifting to the clock, 11:42 p.m. The same minute, the pounding started again. At first, it was soft, like a knock on wood. Tap, tap, tap. Then it grew louder. Thud, thud, thud. It came from the back fence, the old wooden one that separated my yard from Joel and Charlotte's. I felt my heart push hard against my chest. I wanted to stay calm. I wanted to be strong for my girls. But the sound kept growing, like someone was pushing, testing, forcing. I walked quietly to the hallway window that overlooked our backyard. I pushed the curtain just a little. My breath stopped. One fence panel was shaking, hard. The moonlight lit the yard. I could see the outline of a hand, someone pushing from the other side. I quickly backed away from the window before whoever it was could see me. For a moment, I stood there in silence, listening. Thud. The panel jumped again. I whispered to myself, "Stay calm, Barbara. Stay calm. The girls are sleeping. You must stay calm." I forced myself to breathe slowly. I turned off every light in the house, except the kitchen nightlight. I didn't want whoever was outside to think I was awake. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. But then I paused. If I called, Joel and Charlotte would twist the story. That's what they were good at, twisting things, making me look like I was the one overreacting, making it seem like I was the troublemaker. And then I remembered the words the neighbor whispered earlier, that Joel and his wife did this at their last house too. My hands tightened around my phone. I looked outside again. The fence panel was now slightly bent inward. Not broken, but close. Whoever was on the other side wanted me scared. And I was. But something inside me, a quiet strength I didn't know I had, started rising. I went out the back door softly, stepping onto the porch. The cool night air touched my skin, and the smell of cut grass filled the yard. My yard was peaceful. My home was peaceful. No one had the right to shake that. I walked down the steps, slow and steady, keeping my eyes on the fence. I didn't speak. I didn't shout. I simply moved closer, one step at a time. And then the pounding stopped. Everything went quiet. I listened. No footsteps, no voices, no movement. Only the sound of crickets in the distance. I stepped closer until I was just 3 feet from the shaking panel. My hands were trembling, but I made myself reach out. I touched the wood, gently, just enough to feel the vibration. It was still warm. Someone had been there only seconds ago. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" The night did not answer. I backed away slowly and returned to the porch. Before going inside, something made me look over at Joel's house. His upstairs window, the same window with the cameras, had a soft glow behind the curtain. Someone was awake in that room, watching, waiting. When I closed the door, I locked every lock. Then I slid a chair under the handle. I sat on the couch with my blanket wrapped around my shoulders. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the strange feeling like a storm was coming straight toward my family. I stayed awake until the sky turned from black to gray. When the sun finally rose, I walked outside again to check the fence. And that's when I saw it. A small folded note on the ground, placed right under the bent fence panel. Someone had quietly slipped it through the gap during the night. My heart thudded. I bent down, picked it up, and opened it with shaky fingers. It had only 4 words, and those 4 words made my stomach drop. The note reads, "We are not done."
I couldn't keep letting fear run my home. Not in front of my girls. Not after the picture someone sent me last night. So when the sun rose gently over Redwood Court, I made a decision I should have made weeks ago. We were getting a camera. A real one. Motion activated. Clear night vision. Loud alarm. I bought it before work, drove home faster than usual, and by evening, Maya and Lily were already barefoot on the porch with tiny screwdrivers in their hands. "Mom, let me hold the flashlight," Maya said. "I want to clip the wires," Lily added. Their voices warmed me. Even in all this stress, they wanted to help. They were tired of feeling pushed around, too. I knelt under the porch light, steadying the camera mount. "Okay," I told them gently. "This isn't about spying. This is about keeping us safe." They nodded with serious little faces. When the final screw clicked into place, Maya whispered, "Do you think Mr. Joel will stop now?" I gave a small smile I didn't really feel. "I hope so, honey." But I already knew the truth. Bully behavior doesn't stop on its own. Bullies only stop when someone tells them to stop. That night, the air outside was cold and still. I checked the camera app on my phone every few minutes without even meaning to. The girls fell asleep on the couch beside me, curled under a soft blanket. Around 1:12 a.m., the notification beeped. Motion detected. Front porch. My heart jumped. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and opened the live feed. And there he was, Joel, sneaking across my lawn in the dark. He moved slowly, careful with every step, looking around like he didn't want to be seen, but the camera caught him perfectly. He was holding a big black bag, a whole bag of leaves. He walked straight to my fence, untied the bag, and dumped everything on my side, all of it. He even used his foot to push them further into my yard. Then he walked back to his house like nothing happened. I stared at my phone screen in total silence. I wasn't scared this time. I was angry. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't even a misunderstanding. This was someone making a choice, a clear choice. A grown man sneaking around at night, dumping leaves on a single mother's yard while her children slept. I felt something in me rise, something strong, something steady. I whispered to myself, "This ends now." But before I could think about what to do next, I heard a rustle outside, then another. Then something soft brushed against the porch. I walked to the door, opened it slowly, and froze. My entire porch was covered, not just sprinkled, covered. Leaves had been arranged in a perfect circle,
almost like someone had taken hours to carefully place them one by one. Yellow leaves, red leaves, brown leaves, all neatly touching edge to edge. A perfect ring. My stomach turned. It didn't feel like the usual mess Joel made. There was something strange about the shape, something planned, something meant to send a message. The night breeze lifted a few leaves gently, making the circle almost breathe. I stepped back inside, locking the door. Why a circle? Why now? Why after he saw the camera go up? I looked at the footage again, trying to see if he made the circle, but the video only showed him at the fence, never on the porch. Which meant someone else made the circle. Someone else placed it. Someone who knew how to move without being seen. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Motion detected. Side yard. I clicked the live feed. The screen glowed. Something, or someone, was moving behind my house. A shadow. I didn't want to drag anyone into this, but I couldn't do it alone anymore. The camera footage on my phone was undeniable. Joel sneaking across the yard, dumping leaves, moving like he thought no one could see him. The girls needed protection, and I needed proof. I decided to quietly show it to two neighbors I trusted, Mrs. Delaney, who always had a kind word and a watchful eye, and Mr. Harris, a retired teacher who knew the street like the back of his hand. I knocked on their door softly and let them watch the clips. At first, they were silent, eyes wide. Then Mrs. Delaney whispered, "Barbara, this isn't normal. You need people to know." Mr. Harris nodded. "He's been crossing boundaries for too long. You're not imagining it." I felt a flicker of relief. If anyone was going to help, it was them. Word spread slowly, quietly at first. The quiet reassurance of neighbors who finally understood gave me a little strength. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. There were people watching. Watching Joel. Watching Charlotte. And Charlotte noticed. I started seeing her pacing in her front yard more than usual. I could hear the phone pressed against her ear, the strained tone of someone yelling, calling anyone who would listen a traitor. Meanwhile, Joel didn't stop. If anything, he escalated. One morning I stepped outside to get the mail and froze. My driveway was blocked by his truck. I honked, but it didn't move. I had to squeeze past, careful not to scratch it. The next day, at 6:55 a.m., the hum of his industrial leaf blower blasted through the neighborhood. It was early, too early. My girl stirred and groaned, groggy from being woken up again. I gritted my teeth and tried to ignore it, but it rattled my nerves like no alarm clock ever could. And then, the trash bins. My recycling bin and regular trash were tipped over again, bottles and papers scattered. I rushed outside, gathering everything, my hand shaking slightly as I tried to stay calm in front of the girls. I kept thinking, how far will he go? By now, almost everyone on the street knew something was happening. Some neighbors gave me sympathetic looks. Others looked nervous, like they didn't want to get involved. I was beginning to feel like the street itself was alive with tension. Every morning, the quiet cul-de-sac felt like a stage, and I was trapped in the center. Then the call came. The HOA. I froze. My hand was still on the phone. The voice on the other end sounded official, polite, but the words hit me like ice water. "Barbara, this is regarding a noise complaint filed against you by Joel Turner." I blinked. What? No, that can't be right. Yes, ma'am. The complaint states that your activities are disturbing your neighbors, and there's a scheduled review next week. My heart sank. Of course, Joel's plan was unfolding. He wanted to flip the story, make me look like the troublemaker, make my kids and me the problem, in everyone else's eyes. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I swallowed it. I had the footage. I had witnesses. I wasn't helpless. Still, the timing, the audacity, it was shocking. I glanced at the girls playing quietly in the living room. They didn't know yet, and I wanted to keep it that way. I sat down, heart pounding, thinking through my next steps. If Joel thought he could intimidate me with the HOA, he hadn't counted on the neighborhood watching him. But there was a bigger question now. How far would he go next? And who else was involved in all of this? Because the camera, the leaves, the notes, someone else was out there, watching, planning, waiting. And now, with the HOA complaint, it was clear that Joel wasn't playing alone. He had allies. Or at least, he was trying to make it seem that way. I took a deep breath, clenched my fists, and whispered to myself, this ends soon, one way or another.
It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where sunlight spills through the curtains and everything should feel peaceful. But peace had been stolen from us weeks ago. Maya and Lily were already busy in the living room, whispering to each other with serious little faces. "Mama," Maya said, walking up to me with determination in her eyes, "we have an idea. Can we put a camera facing Joel's house?" I froze. "You mean spy on him?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "No, Mom," Chimend. "We just want to know what he's doing. We're tired of being scared." Their small voices shook slightly, but their eyes were steady. I looked at them, really looked. These girls had been living under stress they didn't deserve, tiptoeing around the yard, hearing the blower too early, waking to trash tipped over, the note under the fence. They wanted to fight back, in their own small brave way. I swallowed. My heart ached. I didn't want to put them in danger, but their courage made me stronger. "Okay," I said finally, taking a deep breath. "We'll do it, but carefully. You stay inside. I'll place it on the porch facing their yard. We'll make sure it's safe." The girls' eyes lit up. Maya ran to grab the small portable camera we had lying in the kitchen drawer. Lily followed, holding the charger and a flashlight. I guided them through the setup, teaching them to angle it properly, to test the motion sensor. "This is our watchful eye," I whispered, trying to make it sound like a game. That evening, after dinner, we all sat together in the living room. The camera app glowed on my phone, showing a perfect view of Joel and Charlotte's yard. Minutes passed quietly. Then the first movement appeared. Charlotte. She was at the bus stop talking to the neighbors' kids, pointing fingers, whispering and laughing loudly. "She's so soft," Charlotte said, clearly loud enough for the kids to hear. "And can you believe she even complained about leaves? And her kids?" Maya's little hand grabbed mine. "See, Mom? We aren't imagining it. She's saying bad things." I squeezed her hand, feeling a mix of anger and pride. They were noticing, understanding, and standing strong. Then the camera caught Joel. He crept toward the fence, dragging a bag of leaves. But this time, he didn't use the blower. He bent down and started tossing handfuls of leaves directly over the fence, one by one, manually. I leaned closer, my chest tightening. He had been doing it by hand. Not just the blower, not just the noisy mornings. He had been sneaking over intentionally, wasting time, leaving me little messages under the guise of accidents. I felt a slow, cold anger rising. I looked at Maya and Lily, who were watching the screen wide-eyed. "We can stop being scared," Maya whispered, almost like a promise. Yes, I said softly, we can, and we will. But just as I was about to pull the camera closer for a better look, the screen flickered. A shadow moved quickly across the lawn. Not Joel, not Charlotte. Someone else. I held my breath. The camera couldn't catch details, but I could see the shape. Tall, moving fast, avoiding the light. My stomach dropped. The girls leaned closer to me, sensing my tension. "Mom, what is it?" Lily asked. I swallowed. I don't know, but someone else is out there, watching us, watching Joel and Charlotte too. The moment stretched, silent except for the hum of the camera and our quiet breathing. Then Joel stopped tossing leaves, straightened, and looked directly toward the camera, as if he knew. And then, a loud crash echoed from the side yard behind our house. We all jumped.
It had been a long day. Leaves dumped again. The girls anxious after watching the live feed, and my phone buzzing with HOA updates. I thought I could finally breathe for a moment. Then I saw it. A plain white envelope slipped under the front door. No stamp, no name, just sitting there, as if it had been waiting for me. I picked it up carefully. My fingers trembled a little. Something inside told me it was important. Something told me it was urgent. I tore it open. Inside, there were photographs. Photos of Joel and Charlotte, but not here, from another neighborhood, another town. The pictures were clear. They had been taken during some kind of protest. Angry neighbors holding signs, words shouted, scrawled, printed, and painted on boards. Joel and Charlotte out. Stop the harassment. We deserve peace. My stomach dropped. I looked closer. I could see the faces of the neighbors, angry, frustrated, pointing fingers. And Joel and Charlotte, looking smug, unbothered, almost proud, standing at the center of it all. A typed note fell out with the photos. I picked it up. The message was simple. Don't let them do it here. I felt my hands tighten around the paper. My mind raced. They weren't new to this. They hadn't just been careless neighbors. They had a history, a pattern. Wherever they went, chaos followed. People left angry, families upset, fear and frustration left behind like footprints in sand. Suddenly, everything made sense. The bracelet under the leaves, the hairpins, the mysterious notes, the escalation, the camera footage. Joel and Charlotte weren't just targeting me because they were careless. They were testing boundaries. They were using fear as a tool. I looked at Maya and Lily. They were sitting nearby, quietly watching me. They didn't know the full story yet, and I wanted to protect them from the shock. I slipped the photos into my drawer and took a deep breath. I had to be careful now. I had proof of their history, yes, but if they realized I knew, they would escalate. I decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The street was quiet. The sun had set hours ago, leaving a calm orange glow in the distance. And then I saw it. A police car, slowly rolling down Redwood Court, its headlights cutting through the dim evening like a spotlight. It stopped directly in front of our house. My heart skipped. I grabbed the girl's hands instinctively. "Stay inside, okay?" I whispered. The officer stepped out slowly, walking toward the driveway. He looked official, professional, but my stomach was in knots. "Barbara, right?" the officer asked, voice calm but serious. "We received a report." My mind raced. "A report? What kind of report?" The officer held up a small notebook. "Allegations of vandalism, that your children were seen damaging property in the neighborhood. Joel Turner filed it." My breath caught in my throat. Joel. Of course. He had already started building his story, framing my girls, using the police as another tool to scare me, another move in his game. I looked at Maya and Lily. They were sitting nearby, quietly watching me. I forced a steady voice. "It's okay. I'm handling this. You stay here, all right?" The officer cleared his throat. "We need to take a statement." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. My mind was racing 1,000,000 miles per hour. I had proof. I had witnesses. I had the camera footage. But Joel had started the next step in his plan. And that's when I realized the battle had just entered a whole new level.
I had spent the entire morning preparing. Every clip from every camera, every photo, every note, neatly organized on my phone, ready to show Officer Jackson. The girls hovered nearby, quietly observing, knowing this was a turning point. "Mom, are you sure this will work?" Maya asked, her eyes wide but hopeful. I smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I hope so, but we have to stay calm. We can't let fear control us anymore." When Officer Jackson arrived, I felt my stomach tighten. But I stayed composed. I handed over my phone, swiping through the footage with precise calm. Joel's sneaky visits, Charlotte gossiping at the bus stop, manual leaf dumping, even the shadowy figure placing leaves in patterns at night. Every single action was recorded. Jackson leaned back, nodding slowly. "This is solid evidence, Barbara. Very solid." I breathed a small sigh of relief. Maybe now, finally, someone in authority would see the truth. Jackson grabbed his radio. "I'm going to speak with Mr. Turner next door." I followed at a safe distance. The sun glinted off the cul-de-sac, birds chirping innocently, masking the tension that filled the space between houses. Joel opened his front door almost immediately, a smug grin plastered across his face. "Finally," he began, gesturing toward me. "She's getting what she—" "Sir," Officer Jackson interrupted sharply, holding up his hand, "would you like to explain why you've been dumping trash and leaves onto Barbara's property repeatedly in the middle of the night?" Joel's smile faltered. His eyes flickered to Charlotte. She gasped audibly, her hand covering her mouth. I held my breath. My entire body had felt like it had gone cold, then hot, then steady. For once, I wasn't the one under scrutiny. Joel opened his mouth again, but Jackson didn't give him a chance. "You also filed a complaint claiming she disturbed the neighborhood. We have video evidence proving otherwise." I felt my hands unclench. This was working. Joel's jaw tightened. He muttered something under his breath, stepping back slightly, but his eyes locked on me. And suddenly, that old familiar fear prickled, the kind that had been following us for weeks. "You don't know who you're messing with," he shouted across the yard, loud enough for the entire cul-de-sac to hear. I froze. My heart pounded. The words felt heavy, dangerous, a warning wrapped in arrogance. But then, Charlotte whispered quietly, almost to herself, barely audible, "She ruined everything, again!" I blinked. Did she just admit it? Did she finally realize the chaos had always been their own doing? I held the girl's hands tighter. I looked at Joel,
saw the anger boiling behind his forced bravado, but I also saw the cracks. He was not in control anymore. I straightened my shoulders. "You've had your fun for weeks," I said softly, my voice steady. "But this ends today." The neighbors peeked through blinds and over fences, curiosity mixed with hope. They had seen the chaos. They had watched. And now, justice was arriving in real time. Joel stepped forward, trying to regain composure, but every step he took looked more forced than natural. Charlotte backed him, her whispering, barely hidden guilt now visible in her eyes. Officer Jackson nodded at me once, silently signaling that I had done everything right. I felt a surge of calm strength wash over me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just defending myself, I was standing tall. But just as relief began to settle, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. The shadow from before, the one placing the leaves in patterns, the one we couldn't identify, flicked past the camera on my porch. My stomach lurched. Someone else was still involved, watching, waiting, and I realized, even with Joel and Charlotte exposed, the game wasn't over yet.
The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Redwood Court, the kind of evening that whispers calm, as if the world itself is holding its breath. But I wasn't calm. Not yet. I had a plan. A quiet, elegant plan. One that would show Joel and Charlotte exactly what their choices had caused, without losing my dignity. I stepped into the yard, rake in hand, and began. Each leaf on my lawn felt heavier than it was, not because of weight, but because of memory. The piles of leaves Joel had dumped here over the past weeks were more than just debris. They were tiny records of every time I had been tested, every morning I had been woken by the blower, every time I had felt the unfairness creeping into my life. Maya and Lily were behind me, holding flashlights and cameras, capturing each step. Their eyes glimmered with pride and anticipation. They had been through fear, stress, and sleepless nights. Now they were part of the reclamation. I worked methodically, raking each leaf, brushing off dirt, and placing them into neat piles. 22 piles, one for each documented incident. The number made me breathe slower, focus sharper. Each pile told a story: the hairpins, the bracelet, the trash, the tipped-over bins, the early morning leaf blower attacks. Every time Joel and Charlotte thought they could intimidate us, we had endured. Now the evidence was tangible, a visible testament to their repeated actions. By the time the piles were ready, the neighbors were quietly gathering along the street. Some stood on porches, others peeked from behind blinds. It was subtle, respectful attention, no cheering, no shouting, just the calm observation of justice being served, one leaf at a time. I picked up the first pile, carefully carrying it across the small strip of yard that separated us from Joel and Charlotte. My heart raced. The air smelled of autumn, damp earth, and something else. Anticipation. I set it down on Joel's lawn, slowly, precisely. Neighbors whispered quietly. I moved to the next pile, then the next. The wind swirled lightly, lifting a few leaves as if nature itself wanted to participate in the display. When the last pile was in place, I stepped back. 22 neat piles, each carefully documented, each a quiet trophy of persistence and resilience. I looked at Joel. He was frozen at the doorway, hands on hips, mouth slightly open. His smug expression had vanished. Charlotte, however, started moving. At first, I thought she would yell, but then I saw her shoulders shake. I froze.
Tears streamed down her face. The sound of her quiet sobs drew a hush from the street. I felt no pity, only the realization that our display had reached her in a way nothing else could. Through her tears, she whispered, barely audible, but clear enough, "We were going to lose this house if we got another HOA penalty." The words landed like stones. Suddenly everything made sense. The panic, the escalation, the constant pressure, the manipulation. It wasn't just ego or mischief. Their actions had been driven by fear. Fear of consequences, fear of losing control, fear of being exposed. I exhaled slowly, realizing this moment was bigger than leaves, bigger than me or the girls. It was the perfect balance of truth and patience, of calm persistence over chaos. The neighbors started murmuring, supportive but restrained. Eyes met mine. Their nods were subtle, but I knew the message was clear. We had restored order. We had reclaimed dignity. Yet, even in that quiet victory, a small chill ran down my spine. Because as Charlotte cried, I noticed Joel's eyes flicking toward the side yard, toward the shadows where, weeks ago, someone or something had been moving. Was the mysterious figure still out there, watching, waiting? The victory felt sweet, but the story wasn't fully finished.
The Maplewood community chanter smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet. The room buzzed with murmurs as neighbors shuffled into folding chairs. I clutched my folder tightly, filled with every piece of evidence I had collected over the past weeks: photos, videos, HOA complaints, and notes. Maya and Lily held my hands, their tiny fingers gripping mine with quiet determination. The meeting was supposed to start at 6:30 p.m., but the chatter made it feel later. I could feel the tension crackling in the air. Joel and Charlotte sat across the room, visibly annoyed, whispering to each other. Joel's jaw was tight. Charlotte kept adjusting her scarf, trying to maintain composure. When the HOA president called the meeting to order, the room fell silent. I stood and took a deep breath, projecting calm that I didn't fully feel. "Good evening, everyone," I said, voice steady. "I'm Barbara Hughes. I'm here to present evidence regarding repeated disturbances at my property from Mr. and Mrs. Turner." I clicked the first video on my phone, projecting it on the wall using the small projector the HOA provided. The room gasped as Joel was caught dumping leaves, manually tossing trash, and Charlotte gossiping loudly at the bus stop. I walked the crowd through the timeline, each pile of leaves, each tipped-over bin, each note. Neighbors whispered and nodded. Some even leaned closer, confirming my story had been true all along. Joel tried to interrupt once, his voice rising in frustration. "Excuse me, this is ridiculous." The HOA president raised a hand. "Mr. Turner, this meeting is no longer about Barbara Hughes. It is now about your actions. Please remain silent while evidence is presented." Joel's face went red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Charlotte gripped his arm, whispering frantically. I continued calmly. I tried to give the benefit of the doubt. I spoke to them politely. I installed cameras because the harassment continued. And now the truth is in front of everyone. My children's safety, my peace, and our property rights were compromised repeatedly. The room stayed quiet, tense but respectful. I could feel the support. Then the HOA president cleared his throat and spoke slowly, deliberately. After reviewing all evidence and testimonies, the HOA board has reached a decision. I held my breath. Maya and Lily squeezed my hands, sensing the gravity of the moment.
Penalties will be applied to Mr. and Mrs. Turner, totaling $4,200 in property damage and violations. Additionally, they are suspended from all community privileges for 6 months. A stunned silence followed. Joel's mouth fell open. Charlotte covered her face with her hands, shaking. The room erupted in whispers and soft applause. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight lift from my chest. For weeks, fear had held us captive in our own home. Now justice felt tangible, real, visible. Neighbors approached me quietly afterwards, murmuring words of support, hugs for the girls, smiles that said, "We saw the truth. We knew you were right." Joel muttered under his breath, barely audible, but it was enough for me to hear. "She ruined us." Charlotte didn't speak, only stared at the floor, her earlier tears drying, replaced by shock and disbelief. I glanced at Maya and Lily. They were beaming, their eyes bright. For the first time in weeks, the girls felt safe. Peace wasn't just a dream anymore, it was reality. But even as relief washed over me, a tiny shiver ran down my spine. Because from the back of the room, I thought I saw a figure, someone I didn't recognize, lingering near the exit, watching everything unfold. They didn't move with the crowd, didn't leave, just watched. I blinked, but when I looked again, they were gone. The victory felt complete. The Turners were accountable, but a small part of me knew this story might not be entirely over.
The morning sun bathed Redwood Court in a golden glow, soft and peaceful. It was the kind of light that made leaves sparkle and shadows stretch lazily across the sidewalks. But today, the street was anything but lazy. The neighbors were already gathering along the cul-de-sac, curious, tense, but quietly excited. Whispers floated through the air. Finally, she's going to get closure. They can't get away with this anymore. Maya and Lily held my hands, their small fingers clutching mine with nervous energy. The HOA had required Joel and Charlotte to apologize publicly. I hadn't asked for it, didn't even know it was possible. But here we were. Justice had a face now, and it would stand across from mine. Joel and Charlotte walked down the narrow strip of sidewalk toward our house. Joel's steps were heavy, stomping, the kind of walk that tried to mask shame with bravado. Charlotte walked slightly behind him, shoulders slumped, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Barbara," Joel muttered, barely audible, but the words were there. His apology was rushed, half-hearted, a formality, a box checked. Then Charlotte stopped in front of us. Her eyes shimmered with tears she could no longer hold back. She took a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Barbara. I really am." Her voice broke in a way that made the air feel heavier in a good way. Honest, raw. I nodded, slowly, calmly, not cruel, not soft, just strong. I wanted the girls to see strength, not anger, not revenge, just truth, the kind that makes people accountable for themselves. The neighbors stayed silent, respectful. They had watched our struggle for weeks. The quiet acknowledgement in their eyes was more powerful than any applause. Joel muttered something under his breath, but Charlotte's apology hung in the air. I could feel it, like a weight lifting. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, real calm. Then, it happened. Joel stormed back toward his house, slamming the door so hard it shook the frame. The sound echoed across the cul-de-sac. My heart skipped. The girls flinched. I stayed rooted, knowing I couldn't let fear creep back in.
A moment of tense silence. Then, glass shattered. The sound cut through the street like a knife. My stomach lurched. I could hear it clearly. A vase? A window? I couldn't tell. I only knew the anger had turned inward. Joel's frustration, his need to dominate, had nowhere else to go. And now it was consuming him. Not me, not the girls. I exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and caution. This was a turning point. Joel's threats, his games, his arrogance, it was all collapsing from within. And Charlotte, she stood quietly, head bowed, realizing fully the cost of their choices. The neighbors whispered again, this time with relief. Some nodded to me, others shook their heads in disbelief, but all of them understood. We had won without lowering ourselves. We had stood strong. Maya and Lily looked up at me, eyes wide, voices small but full of awe. "Mom, did we really do it?" "Yes," I said softly. "We did it, together." But even as I smiled, the broken glass glittered on Joel's porch. The sound of anger turned inward was loud, sharp, and unpredictable. It reminded me control over others can't last forever, and sometimes the real consequences are the ones people inflict on themselves. And from the side of the street, a shadow lingered, watching. I caught it out of the corner of my eye, just for a second, a figure unseen by the others, waiting, observing, perhaps curious, perhaps planning. The victory was real, satisfying, and complete, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the story had one more small, unexpected twist left. The week after the HOA showdown felt like waking up from a long, tense dream. Redwood Court was quieter, calmer, almost peaceful. The hum of leaf blowers was gone. The subtle tension that had lurked on every corner, in every yard, had lifted. Maya and Lily ran around the front yard, laughing freely for the first time in weeks. Their giggles echoed down the street, bouncing off the houses, carrying a weightless happiness I hadn't realized we'd been missing. I watched them from the porch, sipping my coffee, feeling a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in months. Joel's professional troubles had just begun. His company had received a report detailing his behavior, both the HOE violations and the escalation caught on camera. A disciplinary review was scheduled for him that week. Suddenly, his arrogance and disregard for boundaries weren't confined to the cul-de-sac. They were impacting his job. The thought gave me a quiet satisfaction. But that evening, as I tidied the porch and the girls quietly drew in the living room, I noticed movement across the way. Charlotte, alone, perched on Joel's front steps, her legs curled up, her hands cupped around a cigarette. I had never seen her like this, vulnerable, small, almost human in a way the neighborhood never saw. She didn't notice me at first. I stayed quiet, unsure whether to speak or just observe. Then, almost whispering to herself, she said, "I wish we had been your friends. You're strong." Her words were unexpected, almost fragile. A strange mix of regret and admiration floated in the air between us. I didn't respond, only watched her as she stared into the fading light, the cigarette glowing softly. The image was surreal, a woman I had feared and who had caused weeks of torment, admitting some small truth about my strength. I felt a wave of calm pride wash over me. Not pride in revenge, but pride in protecting my children, maintaining my dignity, and standing strong without letting fear control us. The girls peeked from behind the window blinds, their eyes wide, understanding more than I could ever say with words. Then, abruptly,
everything changed. The lights in Joel's house flickered, then went out completely. A brief, eerie silence fell over the street. Maya and Lily gasped, and I felt the familiar knot of tension creep back into my chest. Then a loud crash reverberated from inside their house, metal hitting wood, glass shattering, the kind of noise that made you freeze mid-breath. I could hear Charlotte gasp. The faint glow from her cigarette lit her face, and I saw her eyes widen in shock. I didn't know exactly what had happened, but instinct told me something had gone wrong. Joel's anger, his frustration and desperation had found a new target. Himself. His own actions, his own chaos had caused a disaster inside his home. I stayed on the porch, keeping the girls close, feeling a mix of caution and relief. Relief because the danger from him was turning inward. Caution because the unpredictability of the moment made everything fragile. Charlotte flicked her cigarette into the grass and whispered, almost to herself, "I didn't want this. I never wanted this." I exhaled slowly, realizing that sometimes the consequences people face are not punishment from others, but the results of their own choices. Joel's temper, his need for control, and his poor decisions had finally come full circle. The girls laughed softly behind me, a tentative joy returning. I hugged them close, whispering, "We're safe now, finally." But even as the air returned to calm, the sound of sirens faintly in the distance reminded me unpredictability is never fully gone. And in the quiet moments, when people's own chaos catches up to them, even a strong, peaceful life must stay alert.
Weeks slipped by like gentle rivers flowing toward calm seas. Redwood Court felt different, lighter, quieter. The Joel's yard was finally clean, neat, and ordinary. Their industrial leaf blower sat untouched in the garage, almost forgotten. The constant hum that had pierced our mornings was gone. No more leaves swirling like tiny tornadoes across our lawn. No more trash mysteriously appearing. Just peace. Joel no longer glared when I stepped onto the porch. He avoided eye contact, walked with shoulders hunched and a quiet tension I hadn't seen before. Charlotte, surprisingly, smiled at Maya and Lily when they waved. "Good morning," she said softly. There was no sarcasm, no resentment, only a cautious politeness. I watched the girls play in the yard, their laughter light and carefree. For weeks, their fear had been palpable, mornings filled with dread, afternoons with whispered worries. Now they ran freely, their energy bubbling, unafraid of shadows or leaf blowers or neighbors' whispers. I exhaled slowly, finally allowing myself to feel the weight of weeks of stress lift from my shoulders. My coffee cup warmed my hands, but it was nothing compared to the warmth in my chest. A calm smile spread across my face as I took a slow step onto the porch, watching the neighborhood that had witnessed our struggle. People nodded as they passed. Neighbors offered small smiles, soft waves, and gentle words. Some stopped to say quietly, "You handled that beautifully," or "We're proud of you." It wasn't arrogance or showiness, it was quiet respect. They recognized the courage it had taken to protect my family while remaining calm, composed, and strong. I took Maya's hand and Lily's hand, guiding them slowly across the front yard. The soft breeze rustled through the trees. Leaves fell gently, naturally, swirling in the sunlight like little golden sparks. Nothing forced, nothing threatening, just the gentle rhythm of nature. We sat on the porch steps together, watching the calm street. Our house felt like a fortress of peace, laughter, and safety. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch at noises from next door. I didn't hold my breath when shadows passed our yard. I simply breathed. Weeks later, I noticed the moving trucks at the Turner's house. Boxes and furniture were carefully loaded. Joel gave a stiff nod as he passed. Charlotte smiled politely at the girls, her hand raised in farewell. Their departure felt quiet, final, almost like a sigh leaving the street. On moving day, I received a small envelope slipped under my door. Curious, I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note, written in neat script. "You didn't deserve what we did. Thank you for standing your ground." I held it in my hands for a long moment, reading and rereading it. It was simple, sincere, and unexpected. Even in their departure, they acknowledged their mistakes and my strength. I showed it to Maya and Lily. Their eyes sparkled, a mix of pride and relief. "See, girls? Sometimes doing the right thing, calmly, patiently, wins." We walked to the yard one last time, the breeze lifting the faint scent of autumn. Leaves danced slowly around our feet. I didn't need a leaf blower to feel satisfaction. Nature itself seemed to acknowledge the justice, the calm, the peace we had earned. For once, I felt complete. Peace wasn't just an idea. It was real. It was laughter echoing across the yard. It was a neighborhood that respected honesty and calm strength. It was my daughter's eyes filled with unguarded joy. And it was mine, too. Joel's and his wife are gone. Their chaos, their intimidation, their attempts to control us, all gone. What remained was what mattered most. My family, our home, and a quiet, unshakable peace. Redwood Court would return to its ordinary rhythm. Leaves would fall. Children would play. Neighbors would nod politely. And every time I glanced at the yard, at the gentle sway of the trees, I knew that patience, courage, and calm persistence had created something stronger than fear. A lasting peace that no leaf blower, no tantrum, and no anger could ever disturb again.